Game over.
Welcome to Game Over Montreal. The Montreal Canadiens just ended a back-to-back set on the weekend where they didn't hold the lead for a single second, 1-0-1. That's not too bad. To talk about it, I'm going to bring in my two excellent guests from Eyes on the Prize and also Locked On Canadiens, Scott Matla and Jared Book. How's it going, guys?
Good. It's the vibes are excellent tonight. Better than if we had started the show 15 minutes ago, it might have been a different story, but the vibes today are off the charts if you're a Habs fan right now.
It makes a big difference a couple of minutes, right? Like just one Rem Pitlik goal. Let's start off with the absolute wild shit that the referees pulled at the end of that game. And listen, Weidman should have been in the box. They should have caught that. How they didn't catch that live, I don't know.
Ooh, because I can answer that. They're terrible at their jobs.
Okay, too. But he hauls off and knees a guy in the nuts. I know he was just trying to set a pick, but he went so hard. Just Farabees on the ground. And
right in the Farabeens, man. Right in the
Farabeens. There's okay, that's going into the tweet tomorrow when I put this show out. But he's on the ground and they're like, oh, he looks a little bit winded. It's like, yeah, he's winded. Chris Weidman just kneed him in the balls. Right in the Farabeens. But then the refs go and they call a major penalty on something they did not see, just so they can watch a replay and call a minor. And by the way, the reason why they have to call a major penalty to watch a replay is to specifically avoid going back in time and calling a minor that they didn't see. Listen, did Chris Weidman deserve the penalty? Yes, 100%. But that was some A-grade level shenanigans in a few weeks of banner officiating for the NHL, between Gallagher getting called for unsportsmanlike conduct for a player putting their stick from the bench in his passing lane and him knocking it out of the way, which is ludicrous. I think it might have been Tyler Mott for the Vancouver Canucks, got his own stick chopped out of his hands, flew through the air and hit an opponent in the face, and he got called for high sticking. Please give us off-ice officials. Just have somebody with an eye on the sky, with a few cameras, with a little earbud in the referee on the ice and say, you missed something or you got that call wrong. Because, the friggin' egos going on here and the shenanigans that refs have to pull to get the right call. When, frankly, it's important to get the right call in that situation. What are we doing here? It's utter madness.
I just think the referees need help. And we should give them that help. It's not hard. You want to get the calls right. You don't care about how it's done, right? That's the whole point of instant replay, right? You want the calls to be right. And yes, this can lead to longer games and delays and things like that. But for calls like this, it needs to be done. There needs to be some kind of checks and balances. They thought that adding a second referee would help things. Then obviously, it helped to a certain extent, but you're still missing a ton of stuff. So, I just need help. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. I don't understand why it's taking them so long to do this.
Here's the thing. It's yes, Weidman should have been in the box and they missed the call. And I look at this now and go, okay, is every time they miss a call, are they just gonna be you're getting 5 and everyone's gonna lose their mind on the because even the broadcast why is this a 5-minute major? What is going on? And if that's how you have to review penalties, it's a messed up system because hey, we're calling a 5-minute major that's really a 2-minute minor because we missed the 2-minute minor the first time because we suck at our jobs. It'd be like me walking into work and being I don't actually have an equivalent for this. That metaphor got out of hand, but what are we, like you said, what are we doing here? Like, put someone in the stands
Yeah.
that, hey, you missed this, you missed this. Like, things get missed every game, but something like that that's egregious needs to be looked at. And it's like, you need to call that kind of thing. Like, that's not even like subtle. Like, it was
The
blocked.
worst part
or-
is the worst part is like, what if it wasn't a 2-minute minor? Like, what if Weidman did nothing wrong, and he just see a guy on the ice,
And then
they call a
play
5-minute
dead.
major, and then you call a 5-minute major. You have to call a penalty at that point. You can't say no penalty at all. I don't think. Maybe you can, but it's just like, what if you call play dead? He doesn't do anything wrong, and then you're stuck. Then you're wondering, like, why did they call a 5-minute major? Just because they wanted to review a guy on the ice? Like, it's just it's they're lucky it was a penalty, right? Because that could have been a lot worse, really.
I would assume that they knew it was a penalty because they already saw it replayed on the Jumbotron. Like, that was clearly what happened, right? Is they saw the replay and they were like, okay, we gotta call something so that we have the excuse to call that because it's too egregious to let go. And like, you're right, it is too egregious for them to let go. It's too bad of a penalty. But man, we gotta figure out something to figure out how the refs can do a better job here, because the game is getting faster. The ice, is not getting any easier to traffic around. The bodies are getting bigger, harder to see stuff.
And
I
the
don't
referees
know
are
if it's-
younger too. Like,
Yeah.
there's a development problem, right? Like, you're getting guys called up from the AHL, and there's a lot of referee retirements, and they have to backfill. Like, I think in the last for 3 or 4 years, there's been like at least 10 referees who have retired, and that's a lot of guys to just fill in. And it's just like you have to kind of go into this, and it's just it's a problem. It would be like, I think that you need to have, like, when these guys retire, when referees retire, have them go upstairs. Like, baseball does that, right? Baseball, if you retire from on-field umpiring, you can go up and to be one of the video officials and review things from up there. Like, I just think like there has to be some kind of development, and we talk about with players, we talk about coaches. Referees are probably more important than that, right? It affects both teams on the ice. So it makes too much sense that we're still talking about this.
Yeah, I don't know if it's like an ego issue, if the league doesn't want to step on refs. I'm gonna have to have Tim Peel again on the show so I can bug him about this, because this is absolutely wild. And I know, like, he's pretty candid as far as former NHL employees go, which is probably why he's gotten in trouble a few times with the league. But something has to change here, whether it's the refs' egos or the league not wanting to change. I mean, frankly, I think pretty easy to assume that the league doesn't want to modernize, because it's that way every other area. So it's
just funny. Like, how many referees do you know their names just because they're awful at their
too
jobs?
Too many.
Like,
And
TJ
most of
Luxmore
them.
for sure.
like
TJ Luxmore, like 6 out.
I'm the more I look into it and the more I think about it, I often wonder, are the officials bad or is their direction bad? Right? Like, are they given conflicting information? Because we know that they are, frankly. They're told crack down on this kind of penalty, but also like manage the game. Because game management is a real thing that is a directive from like the head of the officials, right? Like, it's very clear. Tim Peel was let go last year for saying the quiet part out loud, not because nobody does that. We all know that happens. Like, you look at last game where I think it was like the Canadiens got a penalty. I forget what the penalty was, but it was just like the softest call imaginable in the third period. Oh no, it was Josh Anderson when he got taken out of the scrum. And it was very clear that he didn't start anything. He was just the guy that was there that they took out of it, and Seattle scored on the power play. But the reason why they called that call is not necessarily because he did something egregious, but because the Canadiens had the majority of the penalties or the power plays in that game. They're like, it's an even game. Give one to Seattle. It's like that kind of bull frustrates people, and there's no clarity game to game of how the game is going to be officiated. And that's for the players too. The frustration level has to be extremely high. I mean, obviously there's communication between them and the official on the ice that we as observers aren't privy to, so it might be less frustrating for them. But call the damn rule book, figure out how to give refs the ability to check themselves, because I think most guys probably do want to not make mistakes, right? Like, it's just most people in the world don't want to make a huge mistake in front of millions of people. Just a guess, you know? So give them the ability to talk to somebody in their ear and say, like, did I make a mistake? Was that a bad call, or should I have missed that? Like, have some sort of check and balance here, because it's utter chaos. And this is probably the worst officiating that I've ever seen in the regular season. And we're headed towards the playoffs. And I just don't want to see playoffs as officiated as poorly as the last few have been, because it's been an absolute.
You mean you don't want to watch a guy bleeding from the face from a very obvious high stick and then not call anything, or watch a guy get punched in the face directly? What? That doesn't sound fun to you? It was so much fun last year, as I, lost some of my hair watching the Habs play Vegas, but whatever the NHL wants, I guess, right?
Well, I mean, it wasn't even that. You could even go farther back, and Matt Niskanen got suspended 2 games for a play that was not even called on the ice. He literally cross checks a guy in the face, and there's no call. But I just think, look, the argument that I hear a lot about, like, calling the rule book is like, oh, you'll call everything a penalty. Yeah. And then guys will adjust, and there won't be penalties anymore.
And there'll be more open space and even strength, and scoring will go up, and literally everyone will be happy. Like,
except Twitter.
Yeah, well,
except Ben Sherratt.
Happier. It's a relative scale, Scott. I mean, Matt Drake will still complain about literally every single penalty call on the Montreal Canadiens, but that's Gallagher. Matt. You gotta love him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it just seems like, every fan base is gonna think that they're being wrong, right? Like, and that's the key, that it's incompetence and not bias, right? Because, like, it's too. I don't want to call them incompetent. That's too strong of a word, but, like, it's not biased. Like, they're not purposely biased against your team, because that would require them to be, smart and, like, doing this on purpose. And like I always say this, but don't confuse bias with incompetence, right? Like, it's just two different things. Like, I don't think that they're smart enough to just be biased against Brendan Gallagher or the Montreal Canadiens or things like that. But I do think that it plays into a part, right? Like, it's just, it just needs to be better, right? Like, Connor McDavid not drawing a penalty in 4 games in the playoffs is kind of like, those are things that make you go, maybe something is wrong here.
Yeah, 100%. We've got a wild Leafs fan in the chat here asking us to talk about Matthews cross-checking Dahlgren. We might touch on it later, but we're not going to talk about the Leafs for a while, because we're just watching the Canadiens game, and you're also chirping about the Habs not being in the playoffs. When I was talking about officiating, I'm not talking about the Habs. I'm talking about the entertainment value of the playoffs. I want the teams that advance to be the teams that deserve to advance, because it's not always the case. I don't want to.
I ironically like the Montreal Canadiens last year.
Yeah, I like the true in the first round against your team. So you should be wanting this too. All right. I did see a pretty good comment here saying that Weidman is also the guy who fought Scheifele. He's the only guy with balls, and I was thinking, like, yeah, I mean, now Kirby used to, not anymore.
He's got a new pair attached to his kneecap now. After that,
God.
Like. The thing is, it didn't even hit me until we started the show that, oh my God, he kneed him straight in the balls, like right to the dong. And, like, I didn't think of it. I thought he caught him, like, in the stomach, and it's like, oh no, he just straight up, like, UFC kneed that man in the balls, and that's why he's lying on the ice in pain right now. So,
like, I'm assuming it wasn't on purpose, but it would kind of be more funny if it was on purpose. I don't know.
It's a hell of an aim with a knee while moving.
Like, I mean, it's like that whole thing where if you're gonna take a penalty, make it worth it, right? Like, if you're gonna knee a guy, you might as well, make sure he misses.
This is why Martin St. Louis is a great coach. He told Chris Weidman to go out there, knee Joel Farabee and the Farabeens, open up the ice for Ben Sherratt to set up Rem Pitlik shorthanded to score in the final 36 seconds of the game. It's absolute genius hockey. Dominique Ducharme could never, honestly. Like, it's amazing coaching by Martin St. Louis.
Yeah, I mean, got to give it to him. Yeah, speaking of Dom Ducharme, Marty St. Louis has now coached the Montreal Canadiens to 8 wins, 14 games. That is the same amount that Dom Ducharme coached the Montreal Canadiens to in 45. So he has doubled the Canadiens' win total in 14 games. Man, I think even the most optimistic, rose-colored glasses people would not have expected this kind of turnaround. And the thing is, like, it's not even like they're winning every game, right? They're, I think, 8-5-1. So it's essentially 8-6, which is not amazing. It's decent, but the turnaround from 8 out of 45 to this, it's hockey actually worth watching. Like, who would have thought when Weidman took that penalty at the end of the game that the Canadiens were going to come back and score? I didn't. I was ready to turn it off and start like getting the stream going already. And then all of a sudden, Jeff Petrie rushes down the ice, and Ben Sherratt's like, "Oh, I'm Paul Coffey now, and I'm gonna shoot this puck right across the middle of the slot, right to Rem Pitlik." And like, okay, you seeing this, Kyle Dubas? Because you got to trade for this guy. But this team just doesn't quit anymore. And to go from a team where nobody wanted to go out on the ice, it seemed, to this, it's absolutely wild. So Marty St. Louis, give him the friggin' Jack Adams already.
It's such a wild change, like you said, is that everyone's pulling their weight, even if they lose, like, and they do. Like, look at the game against Winnipeg where they lost 8-4. I still don't think they played badly. The effort was there. They just couldn't get a save to save their life that night. And in this game, it's like you, I had to change the article I was writing because they went to overtime in there. And it's like, where was this team for the first, 2/3 of the season? And the answer is in the toilet. But the effort and everything's there, that even if they lose in a tanking season, Martin St. Louis has them doing exactly what you'd want from your team. There's effort there. There's guys trying. Someone just posted the rookie scoring since St. Louis took over the Leafs, or took over the Habs, not the Leafs. And Cole Caufield is 1 point behind Michael Bunting, and Rem Pitlik is in 5th with 11 points in 14 games. That's an insane pace for a lot of guys. And the only person who doesn't look any better is Yoel Armia since St. Louis took over. I don't know if it was just Ducharme's style, if it just was the losing got to this team, but how often do you see 99% of a team immediately look better with a new guy behind the bench, and it's not just like a new coach bounce? Like, they're playing legitimately good hockey and winning games that they should, and some that they shouldn't. And it's a wild, insane turnaround that I couldn't have predicted, honestly. Like, if they won 5 of these games, I would have been like, okay, we're doing better than before anyways. But 8 in 14 is truly, truly impressive stuff.
And the best part is they're still in last.
Right. That's the best part. I was, like, it's funny because they take 3 out of 4 points in the 2 games against teams that are relatively right in front of them in the standings, and they're still in last. Like, it's pretty good. There was one day when Arizona, Buffalo, and Seattle all won. Right? Like, that's a pretty good day for the Montreal Canadiens right now, and it just goes to show how deep the hole they were in was.
Yep.
Like, it's crazy. Like, well, Arizona's playing well now too. Like, it's not like Montreal's the only team that's winning in that bottom. Like, Buffalo's playing a little bit better as well. But I just look. I'm still a fan of Dominic Ducharme. I don't think he's a dumb guy, but it's just insane to me that nobody can figure out that, hey, Cole Caufield should play in an offensive role.
Man,
it's just like, I just don't understand.
1 goal in 30 games with what we've seen since St. Louis took over? What? Like, come on.
The only thing I could think of
that happened.
The only thing I could think of is that he and Brock changed bodies before the season started.
Blame it on poor Brock.
And when Cole Caufield was stuck in Wisconsin with COVID, they switched back. And that's the only rational. That's not even rational. That's just the only thing I could think of. Like, it's not
some freaky Friday shit, man. Like, come on.
Exactly. Wisconsin style. But yeah, it's just it's crazy to me. Like, I don't think it's as simple as they gave up on Ducharme. It's impossible to be that way. Like, it's just, you can't just flip a switch, right? Like, I don't think it's that easy. But I just think it's just, I don't know what he was telling the team, but whatever it was, at a certain point, like, wouldn't you change the message? Like, I just don't understand what he was doing. Like Martin St. Louis, the first day he came in, is like, yeah, I went to man defense. Like it took 4 guys to figure that out. Like, I just don't understand. Like, why was it so hard? Like, it's just what was one thing that Dominic Ducharme did to try and get out of this rut besides change the goalie?
He sent Cole Caufield to the AHL. So,
frankly, at the time wasn't the worst decision he could have made for Cole Caufield, right? Like, it was probably calling him back up too quickly that was the worst decision. But I mean,
they had no other choice, which is the worst part.
Yeah,
it got Pizzetta up when they sent Caufield down the first time. So I guess that wasn't all bad.
And he's still here, which is the wildest part of this season, is that Michael Pizzetta's still here.
Yeah, and scored yesterday.
Yeah.
I really wish he would have scored today. It's his birthday and everything. Like, I really thought that he was going to get one because he seems like the kind of guy that's like, it's my birthday, I'm going to do something sick as hell in this game. But he had his chance and he missed it. He did. Exactly. He had the chance. So I just truly don't get, like you said, what Ducharme was doing. Like, Caufield's playing 4th line minutes. Okay, easier competition, but it's just not working. And then it just stayed there. And then you'd go to like a 2-man advantage power play. And out there is like Gallagher, Armia, Weidman, and Petrie with someone. And it's like, what is going on here? You have a guy whose entire bread and butter is finding soft space and shooting pucks in the back of the net. And he's stapled to your bench right now.
Yeah. There were signs I will never understand last year, right? Like, scratching Caufield and Kotkaniemi to start the playoffs was like, maybe this guy is not prepared and doesn't know what his best players are. And then they won that first game against Toronto on a very lucky play that ended up giving Paul Byron, a highlight real career goal. But overall, you could go through that playoff run and be like, are they winning despite this guy? Because it sure as hell seems like it. I think of when they had I think it was a 4-on-3 power play at some point in the playoffs, and they threw out 2 defensemen. And you're like, are you trying to score? Like, what is going on here? And man, I look at where the Canadiens are right now, despite the fact that they haven't actually made very many personnel, like on the ice changes, and they are in such a better position just by rooting out some of the old school thinkers and having some progressive thinkers on board. And it's going to keep going that way as they build that front office staff up. Sounds like they're going to build something really robust there. And hopefully we get some diversity of thought in that as well. But man, just even ignoring where they're going for the future, the fact that they're playing interesting hockey now is such a breath of fresh air for someone who has to talk about them all the time.
And they're doing it with like Laurent Dauphin as their 2C right now. They don't have any real center depth. It's Nick Suzuki. And then all due respect to Ryan Poehling and Laurent Dauphin and Jake Evans is that Evans is likely at best a bottom 6 center, likely a really good 4C on a good team.
Yep.
Ryan Poehling's not quite there yet. And Laurent Dauphin was a top line AHL center, and that's it. And he's pulling way above his grade right now. To get these kind of results and to see the actual effort from some of these guys in there, he looks like a miracle worker out there. He's playing with no center depth. His wings are good. The defense is hit or miss depending on the night. And he's got his 5th and 6th choice goaltenders right now. It's absolutely wild to see these kind of results. And I don't know if it's what Joel Bouchard and Jean-Francois Houle did with the Rocket over the last 2 years, that these guys are coming up and they're actually at least somewhat NHL competent. But no team with Laurent Dauphin as a 2C should be winning this many games in the fashion that they're winning them. It's really, really impressive. And it might just be the quality of the wingers, Brendan Gallagher being that guy and whatnot. But I can't wrap my head around having one legitimate top 6 NHL center right now and getting these kind of results.
Well, and speaking of Rem Pitlik, that top center, sorry to cut you off, Jared, but I feel like we gotta talk about Nick Suzuki because we've talked about him several times on this show throughout the year of how much pressure is on this kid. And I made the point to Laura Saba last night, Scott's co-host, who I don't know if you saw, Scott, but we have created a fake feud between the two of you because you weren't on one night and now you're on the next night while she's not on. So clearly you're avoiding each other and hate each other. So tune into
In
Locked
my
On
defense,
Canadiens.
I was COVID napping last night, so that's my excuse.
Well, she put out a call that you have to come on next Saturday night when she's on again. You have a Locked On Canadiens show. So if you don't, obviously there's something there. There's a wrestling storyline going on Locked On Canadiens. A few.
Let me tell you there, brother. Macho
At the end of the
Man
show,
Randy.
you can run a promo on Laura. But
I got to record with her after this. I can't do that.
she doesn't need to know until tomorrow. All right, but Nick Suzuki, I talked about it with Laura last night. There's very few players at his age, or frankly at all in the entire NHL, who are a coach's first choice at even strength, power play, shorthanded, overtime, probably shootout in most cases. Like every situation that you're in, whether you're trailing, whether you're leading, he's the guy who's going to go over the bench first. No matter who the coach is in Montreal, he's going to be the guy. And yet, when there's less depth than he's ever had before, and frankly, losing Danault and Kotkaniemi to start the season, you knew it was going to be a rough adjustment for him.
Mhm.
But now there's not even Dvorak. The least depth he's had, his last few games he's played 23-51, 22-22, 23-02, 23-42, 23-27. Those are like first pair defenseman numbers. And he's got 14 points in the last 10 games. He's scoring like crazy. He's equaled his career high. I actually surpassed it tonight with 2 goals. I look back at that game against Edmonton where he scored the goal that ended up getting ruled out because of the Oilers coaching staff's amazing ability to review plays. And then he turns around and is like, I'll just do the exact same thing again. And I was like, this kid, between the playoff performances and what he's doing lately, people need to all recognize this is one badass motherfucker. Like, he is going to be...
Mark Bergevin's... Sorry. Is Mark Bergevin's best move signing him before the season?
Yes. I know
I mean,
people
he would get,
were...
what, $9 million? You get $9 million now, at least?
Oh, I think he would have got that before, like after last year's playoff. If he was a UFA last summer, after the playoffs, he probably would have got that. Like, he is... Yeah. I think people who are trashing that contract in the first half of the season, first of all, weren't taking into account the amount of pressure that he was playing under while nobody around him was performing. And like very short memories. This kid is incredible, and he's going to continue to be incredible. I think the sky is the limit for him. I'm so excited to watch his career.
That's the thing is on the broadcast, they're like, oh, he tied a career high in points. And I went, how? This team's been so shit this year that he did what? And then he surpassed it. And I went, there's still what, like 20 something games left that it's like, imagine if he had a competent coach for the entire season here. Like, and it's like Jared said, Mark Bergevin, if that was his last big move, and I'm pretty sure it was before he got fired outside of, no, he wasn't even the one who claimed the guys on waivers, I don't think. It's probably one of his best because Nick Suzuki coming in a number that starts under 8 for a full-term contract is absolutely insane. Because I look at the one Brady Tkachuk signed, like 2 weeks afterwards, and I go, Nick Suzuki's a better overall player and is cheaper for longer term. It's an incredible deal, and watching him do this and seeing him play, he's so smart with what he does. Defensively, he's smart. In the neutral zone, he makes plays happen. In the offensive zone, he's an ice-cold killer. It's like you said in that game against the Oilers. He scored that one, it got ruled out, so he went, okay, fine. And instead of scoring at 5-hole, he just roofed it over Mike Smith and made that old man feel the whole
because you dropped out there for a minute, Scott.
So what he did, they took the line of Caufield and Anderson, which has been the entire time St. Louis been, and all it did was my internet's going.
Yeah, your internet's cutting you out like crazy. But yeah, your point stands. Essentially, we all know where you were going with it. He is incredible, and he's doing this under, a lot of duress. some points here. Somebody says that Gorton claimed Clegg and Hughes claimed Pitlick. I thought Pitlick was claimed before Hughes was hired, but if that's true, good first move by Kent Hughes. I will say, and I've said it a few times on the show, I really like Rem Pitlick as a player going forward for at least a few seasons, but pay attention to that shooting percentage, folks. I believe he's around 30%. Think of Rem Pitlick as Paul Byron with a little bit more offense and less defense. Don't think of him as more than that. He's a guy that'll probably fit on the third line for a couple seasons, maybe end up on the fourth line if they decide to make the fourth line more of a scoring line instead of like a grinding line. Like if Paling starts next season on the fourth line, Pitlick will be a good fit on the. That'll make sense.
Yeah.
But as soon as we get into like, oh yeah, sign him for 5 years, that's when I'm like, ooh, that's very Bergevin.
Yeah, I think the thing with Pitlick is that it's not just about even the production though. For me, it's just he's always in good spots, right? Like
yeah, I mean that's why his shooting percentage is so
said.
high, right? It's the same as
Right.
Byron.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that, in the future, like as this team develops, like right now he's like the second center, right? He was playing with Caufield and Anderson for the end of that game. I don't think that's where he stays, at least not on a good team. But I think that if you go to a third or fourth line where he's playing with a guy with like Paling or Evans and Lehkonen or someone like that, I think that's a good spot for him. He can play second power play minutes as well. He can play 3-on-3 in the regular season. I just think that he's a smart player. And
He is.
That's one thing that is really coming to the forefront under St. Louis is that the smart guys are thriving. And he said that, when he first came in, he's like, I want my players to make reads. And that's why they're in the NHL. And it's just like, yeah, that's what's working. Like the guys who are playing well, Suzuki, Caufield, Pitlick, they're guys that are smart and can make those reads and find space. And Lehkonen obviously is a great example of that as well, right? So I just think that that's a key thing. And if that's the direction you're going in, if they're building up on guys with great hockey sense, sign me up. Because I mean that it's we're already seeing a difference, and it's been 2 months, and it's way too soon for anything that they've done to make a difference, but it's still making a difference.
Yeah.
That in a year or 2 or 3 from now, once they build their team the way that they want it, I think that's going to be a huge, like, I don't think a lot of people in Montreal have thought about what it means that there's a new regime, right? I don't think they understand. Like Timmins has been here for so long. Bergevin has been here for, almost half as the time, but like 10 years. I don't think people have comprehended that this is new now. Like they have someone in player development now. They have a skating coach. Like they have somebody who can build up these players. And I just think that having a big front office leaning into just information is going to be such a big difference going forward. Like it's already made a difference. Just bringing in a coach like Marty St. Louis is made, like this team has problems. Let's be real. The defensive coverage is still a mess, but they still have the ability to make a quicker turnaround than what made seem like they would have, 2 months ago.
Yeah, 100%.
It does amaze me. Like everything seems to have, and I can't believe this is a thing that I have to praise in the modern NHL, but there's thought behind everything that's happening right now. Like I look at Rem Pitlik and he fits the style that they wanted to play. They want to play with pace and speed and with space. And Pitlik continues to surprise me with just how fast he actually is on the ice. And like you said, that's the modern guy that you round out your bottom six, your fourth line with. You don't need, all due respect to, Michael Pezzetta, but you don't always need the bruiser out there. You want that finesse out there. And maybe Michael Pezzetta can develop some of that. And he's shown that a little bit. But this team's laying a lot of really nice groundwork for what lies ahead. There's still a lot of, cap trimming and other things that have to happen here based on what Bergevin did this past offseason and the offseason before that. But it's a lot better when you see what the core looks like with an actual coach behind it and not just floating aimlessly in the void here like they were. They're getting an idea who actually wants to be here, who can play in this system and who makes it work. And who can we, move out and, bring in someone that does fit that, which is what St. Louis said when he got here. I'm here to help find the guys who want to be here and, those who don't. And right now it's a pretty resounding apparent, result of who wants to be here. And it looks like everybody right now. It's not going to be the case in about a week, but just a complete overhaul. And like you guys said, is hopefully there's more modernization to come with this front office. They hired the skating coach. They have people in player development. What else are they going to do in terms to help, not only Hughes and Gordon, but also St. Louis, who's a rookie behind the bench here, figure out how to get this team to another level. It's great that they're winning now, but okay, the expectation is you're going to crawl out of the basement next season and advance beyond that going forward.
Yeah, 100%. And, we've got some good questions here. I got to shout out to Ian Boisvert, who's a friend of the show. He had a point earlier. He was saying that Chris Weidman, he's done with him. He wants to call him an Uber. Just calling back to the famous Chris Weidman moment from the Ottawa Uber. I feel like I'm kind of in the same spot with Weidman. Like, listen, his underlying numbers are great. He's incredibly sheltered. I think he has good skills, but bad hockey sense. And like he's getting his production a little bit, and I know that he's been, on the first power play, but there's still like every power play, there's plays where I'm like, what the heck are you doing? What is going through your brain that this is the choice that you make on a power play, or like in the position that you're in? It makes no sense to me. But I'm also of that opinion, but I'm also looking at it, and I talked about this with Laura a little bit last night. I look at this Canadiens defense core, and as Hughes has kind of hinted that they're looking for somewhere to put Petrie going forward, there's not going to be many of these guys back next year. And this kind of layers in another comment that we got where they were saying that I hope that they're going to be bad next year as well and get another top pick. Listen, with all the things that have gone wrong this year for Montreal, between the bad shooting, the bad goaltending, the injuries, like they have been the least lucky team in the league to finish last, right? Like it's taken a lot to get to this low point. But if they were to just get everything even, they would still only be about like 27th or 28th. So considering they're going to take some players out of here over the trade deadline, over the draft, probably into next season, they're not going to be a great team right away. I don't think there's a risk of them being outside of the bottom 10 next year, and they could gust down lower if they, if Carey Price is not Carey Price, if he never comes back, if they don't get a solid goaltender at some point. But even if they do go a little bit higher, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, right? Like for these kids to learn. And man, I look at that defense, and I know people were high on Romanov at the beginning of the season. I don't know if anyone on that defense lasts the next 3 years in Montreal.
Romanov's been such a weird thing to me in that I can see what he's trying to do sometimes, and then the hockey IQ stops in that he looks like he doesn't know where to be sometimes. And I don't know if that's just the pairing that he's on with Ben Sherratt or Jeff Petrie or whatever, and they're not communicating. He has moments where he's great. He's in position. He can use he's very athletic. Like he's good at getting around. He's mobile back there. And then there are just times that he looks like he's lost and he's spinning like a top in space because there's a guy here and a guy here. And part of that, I think, goes to the coaching staff, and that either Luke Richardson needs to figure out what he did in the playoffs, which was Carey Price saved ass for 2 out of 3 rounds there, or they need to hire someone who can tell Alexander Romanov, hey, this is what I want you to do. Stop spinning like a top. This is where I want you. And like I said, Ben Sherratt's probably is likely gone. Jeff Petrie's going to be gone more than likely. That leaves David Savard and, Alexander Romanov and Joel Edmondson, maybe Jordan Harris, depending on what goes on with that. It's not like they can just be like, oh, we'll scratch him and call up someone from Laval. There's Sami Niku and Xavier Ouellet and Louis Belpedio. Niku might be a marginal upgrade on Chris Weidman. That's about it. So there's not an immediate answer. And like you said, it's still going to be a little rough road ahead, but that's rebuilding. The Rangers weren't magically good after 1 year. And, take your lumps and draft in the top 10 or whatever in 2023, have some more of your prospects from the last 2 drafts come to roost, and then you start building up and going for it. It might suck, but If you're going to do it right. Don't half-ass it and split the fence like Mark Bergevin did for a decade.
And I think the big
The thing
difference
is-
is going to be that they're not going to play boring hockey, right? They're not going to be bad and awful to watch. They're going to be bad, and there's going to be things to look forward to. Like, you're still going to look at Suzuki, you're still going to look at Caufield, and the young players coming up, and you're going to get excited about those things. That will keep eyes on, even if the wins are few and far between. They're still going to have streaks like this, most likely. I mean, the fact that they've won 8 of 14 with one NHL center. I mean, Jake Evans is probably an NHL center, but like one proven top 9 center. You know, like, even their wingers, there's some guys that are out. Lehkonen out tonight at the last minute. He's been their best player at forward essentially all year. Their defense, they've got tons of guys out, and it wasn't good to begin with. And then they're playing their 3rd and 5th string goaltender. Like, it's incredible what they're doing right now, frankly.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the major thing is, and Scott touched on it, you know, Luke Richardson has worn out his welcome. And I think that, look, it's now been 3 head coaches where the defensive zone coverage has been abysmal.
And the PK
which
he runs.
Yeah, right, exactly. And it was bad when he was with the Islanders before coming to Montreal. And I don't want to throw him necessarily under the bus, but I just think that what if you get Ducharme to St. Louis like improvement on the defense, right? And you know, people are writing off Cole Caufield about a month ago. I wouldn't be so quick to, you know, write off Romanov yet. Obviously, it's a concern, but I think that, you know, first things first, get a new coach in there, see if they can switch things around. You know, defensive zone coverage is probably the hardest thing to change, right? Because it relies on 5 guys to all be on the same page. And, you know, when guys are in and out of the lineup, it's not easy. But the second thing is, like you mentioned, 2023, if they do this right, and I believe they will, they're talking about a splash in free agency, which is fine, right? You have to surround players, right? Getting a real number 2 center is not a bad thing for Nick Suzuki's development. Let's be real here. But I think if they overachieve, even if they overachieve, if they do it, because the way they're doing it now with guys like Caufield and Suzuki and Pitlik and guys who are part of this future leading the way, then that's not a bad thing either, right? Like, it's not all about getting a good draft pick. And that's the whole thing about this whole improvement thing. It's like people are like, oh, it's going to ruin their pick. And it hasn't, first of all. But even if it did, if it's ruining your pick because Suzuki is playing well and Caufield is playing well, that's better than the difference between the first pick and the 5th pick, right? Like,
yes,
that's it's all marginal, right? Like, it's all relative. And so that, you know, it's not like they're winning games right now because, you know, Laurent Dauphin is scoring 20 goals, and, you know, Ben Sherrod is leading the way on defense, and you know, Andrew Hammond is stealing games. Like, they're not relying on those guys to win games, right? So it's a little bit different. But I think that there's a way to, you want your young guys eventually to take a step, right? That's the whole thing with Buffalo and Edmonton when they were bad, and Ottawa even right now, is that eventually you want your young guys to step up and win games, right? You don't want to be in the basement forever. And I think that, you know, I don't think they're going to be magically good next year, but I think there's an argument that they can, you know, get to a respectable, maybe even a playoff race. But as long as they're relying on the right people, it's okay.
Yeah, and I think this is something that I think Canadiens fans have a bit of, like, for lack of a better term, because I don't want to, like, make it not serious, because it is a serious actual medical issue, but some PTSD over, like, the way that the draft has gone for the Canadiens over the last several years. I mean, several. I mean, really, like, since 2007. They see falling down the draft and like, oh, well, you can't get anybody worth value in the middle of the first round or like the late first round. But most teams do all the time. You know, the big thing.
I mean, the Habs have done it themselves.
They have. Cole Caufield was the middle of the first round. You know, even the Canadiens have found those.
Max Pacioretty was at the end of round 1.
Yeah, I said since 2007, Scott. You can't bring up 2007, okay? The one time Trevor Timmons made his.
Why not? It was good.
You talk about PTSD. What if they pick 3rd this year?
Yeah, well,
like
I've already seen
problem.
people freak out about that. But here's the thing: if they pick 3rd this year, I bet you that player is going to be better than what we saw from Galchenyuk and what we saw from Jesperi Kotkaniemi here, because they'll be properly developed, properly handled, not rushed.
Yes.
I think this is going to be the big thing to watch for this, is even players who were drafted under the Bergevin regime who stalled or stagnated, or who maybe we don't necessarily have the highest of hopes for anymore. Like, we don't even talk about Matthias Norlinder really anymore. He had his cup of coffee over here. He was kind of treated like garbage and then went back to Sweden. I'm not sold that he's going to not be an NHLer. I think he might be back here as soon as next year. I think there's something there. Towards the end of his time in the NHL, as he was adjusting to North American ice, I saw something there. So I think there's a lot of prospects that we're going to see over the next couple of years for the Montreal Canadiens that break in and do a lot better than we're expecting. You know, Jesse Ylonen is definitely going to be one of those guys. I'm excited to see what he can do, because he's one of the guys that I know that several members of the media in Montreal were talking about how Arturi Lehkonen is replaceable. He's the only guy that I feel like might be able to fill those shoes a little bit. Different style of player, but kind of brings the same level of attitude, we'll say. And I like Jesse Ylonen, but there's going to be a lot better bang for buck under the new regime, or at least there better be. Or they're selling us
It can't get worse,
a bunch
though.
of hot dog
It can't
water.
get worse.
No, that's the thing.
It
You
can't get
literally
worse.
can't get worse. And yeah,
Oh, it can definitely get worse.
they were
I don't think
literally
it
the
can,
worst.
though, honestly. Honestly, even
Wait, were
even
they?
a bad
Yes,
team
the
gets
Canadiens
lucky
were the
once in a
worst
while.
development program in the entire NHL over the last 10 to 12 years.
We're number one.
Yeah.
We're number one.
Someone here posted, Joshua
Yeah.
Waugh, who is absolutely lighting up the QMJHL this year. And
Mhm.
I've talked to a few different scouts who say that Waugh's, like, the way that he generates offense might not translate that well to the NHL. But while that would be a big issue under the Bergevin regime, which is essentially sink or swim, figure it out or you're a bust, I think this regime, where they're actually going to develop his skill set, he's now an extremely interesting prospect.
Yeah, I think that, look, it's not even guys like that, like Jonathan Drouin, right? Like Christian Dvorak, like they haven't played really under St. Louis. Those are guys that are still young enough to take that next step, right? It's not like their careers are over, right? So I think that, you know, if this team is competitive, let's say 3 years, let's say that's the target, right? Jonathan Drouin, obviously there's a contract to sign there, whatever, but Christian Dvorak is still under contract if they keep him around. Like, those are guys that are still going to be key parts of a team. You know, Dvorak was asked to replace Danault and Kotkaniemi at the same time, right?
Yeah.
Like no one, like it was, you talk about Suzuki having an impossible way to go.
So
Christian
did
Dvorak
Dvorak.
replacing Dvorak and Kotkaniemi at the same time, while playing with, you know, two schizophrenic wingers. Do I play offense or defense? Like, it's like, but like you put
Jesus
Dvorak
Christ.
okay, okay. Let me rephrase. You put Dvorak with.
You're not wrong.
Hoffman,
You can't tell him to play
Hoffman and
defense and give him
Anderson.
Mike Hoffman.
Right. You put him with Hoffman and Anderson. Do you want me to play defense or do you want me to play offense? Like, what do you want me to do here? Like, and I just think that you know, there's a lot of issues here, and I'm curious to see what can happen with the second tier of prospects, because that's the whole thing, right? The problem has never been for the Canadiens developing that top level, right? Like guys like, I know it's been a long time since they've had top players, but they've still had it. You know, Philip Deneau was a top player, you know, and whether they've developed Montreal or not, that's a different story, I guess. But you know, Nick Suzuki, for all intents and purposes, was here under Marc Bergevin. But the difference is that they had nobody, and we're seeing it now, nobody underneath that. Like that, and eventually, and the big thing with the Sylvain Lefebvre era is that nobody came from the AHL either, right? Like there was nobody. And now you look at Michael Pezzetta, right? You look at Michael Pezzetta. You look at guys like Jesse Ylonen. You look at guys like Raphael Harvey-Pinard, Joel Teasdale, Lucas Vedamo even is a, you know, you mentioned replacing Lehkonen. A combination of Ylonen and Vedamo can probably get that done in some capacity. But I just think that you have those guys to fill in the bottom. Ryan Poehling is a good example of that as well. Like, and that's a big difference, right? Like, you don't have to sign guys to fill out your bottom six to like $2 million, $3 million contracts when you have those guys on entry-level contracts coming up.
Or
And I just think
$3.4 million
that's-
for UL Armia, Jared.
Yeah, I mean, you know, uh, man, Mark Bergevin is lucky he signed Suzuki to that contract, because otherwise his last 3 months would be the worst of any general manager ever. I'm not even being
not
like
great.
that's not even hyperbole.
There's Peter Chiarelli.
No,
Yeah,
no,
Chiarelli's in the
I don't think
competition for sure.
in a 3-month period.
Yeah, true. I mean,
from the draft
Whoop.
to letting Deno walk to signing Mike Hoffman for whatever reason to like, and there's nothing that he did from the playoffs on that worked out except for Nick Suzuki and John Sedgwick.
yeah.
Right? Like
Well, when you
everything
put
is
it that
aged-
way,
it's still early, obviously, but everything is aged pretty badly, right? Like coaching staff, the Laval coaching staff worked out okay. They're doing well, but it's just like everything that he's done has aged really badly for now, and except for those two things. So, I mean, it's just, it's been a rough go, but I mean, that's what a new regime is, right? You have to usually undo the mistakes of the previous administration.
Somebody says, if you want to focus on the negative, I'll remind you on the positive. You ready? Chicago Blackhawks, Pittsburgh Penguins. Oh, this is talking about the rebuild. Sorry, out of context. Because people were saying you didn't want to get caught in a forever rebuild like Edmonton and Buffalo. I mean, Edmonton's not in a rebuild anymore. The thing about Edmonton is they really did a good job of making their rebuild last longer by being really stupid. And Buffalo, I think, just tore it down too far. And then they got Eichel and they didn't have anything to surround him with. So they panicked and started bringing in a bunch of assets and trying to fill that void. And it just never worked. And so you had a situation where one team is consistently shooting themselves in the foot and the other team got really impatient and tried to like push out of it really quickly and ended up getting stuck in a rebuild that failed and then going back into another rebuild. So
when I talk about Edmonton, just to be clear, when I talk about Edmonton, I mean pre-McDavid Edmonton.
Yes,
that's what I'm referring to when I mean Edmonton. Obviously now they're out of that, right? But yeah,
current Edmonton is just in the same situation as the Habs were under Bergevin, only they've got a generational superstar in Leon Draisaitl, and they go, well, we can't possibly afford a goalie. We'll just sign Mike Smith for 2 years, and look at how that's paying off for them. So
it's like the Bizarro Canadiens.
Well, it is. It's very, it's McDavid instead of Price, right? Or I guess Price, Subban, Pacioretty versus McDavid, Draisaitl. And I mean, almost everybody's going to take McDavid, Draisaitl over them, understandably. But Ken Holland is essentially Mark Bergevin, right? Bergevin came in to a team that had bottomed out the year before. So he's got a third overall pick. Gallagher's coming up. You know, you've got three pieces that you're severely underestimating because one of them happens to be black. And the goalie, I think everybody knew how good Price was. He's on a great contract. And Pacioretty, everyone's underestimating because they think he's soft for something. But anyway, the next few years, you have, at the very worst, the second best defenseman in the league for a 4 or 5 year stretch, the best goaltender in the league over that stretch. And I think Pacioretty was the third or fourth best goal scorer in the league over that stretch. Edmonton has essentially the same value in two players. And Holland's like, well, you can't go all in every year at the trade deadline. Like, no, you
haven't gone in any year.
But literally, you have no choice. These guys are in their prime. Like this, what are you doing here if you don't find a way around the cap issues to go for it every single goddamn year that these players exist on your team under contract? Look at the Pittsburgh Penguins. The Pittsburgh Penguins have been going all in for like 15 years. They have no draft picks ever. They have no prospects. And then they're like, yes, well, Brian Rust is going to be a point per game player. Who the fuck is Brian Rust? Like the Mark Donk thing happens because they are consistently finding players that fit in their system and developing players that fit in their system with zero assets to move for them. They're just desperate to find players to fill those holes and play along two generational players. And you could argue that Letang is almost as good because he's been through injuries and illnesses spectacularly consistent throughout his career. Good teams find a way.
Ken Holland is a coward. I'm going to say it. Ken Holland is a coward. Go for it. You can't tell me that you can't go for it right now. Like what you like you said, what's your excuse if Pittsburgh can do it? You have prospects to trade here. You have movable pieces, but you're going to throw Zach Cassian and a guy who won't get vaccinated out on the ice?
And like Alex Chason when they signed him again because they used him on the top power play unit. And he scored like 10 goals. Like it's just Dale
who is one person outside the top 10 that has made a career in Edmonton? And like, why are they so scared of trading this pick? Like, what development record do they have? Like, I think it was a couple years ago where they had zero players drafted outside the first round to have played an NHL game for them. Like, that is just ridiculous. And I know it's not all Ken Holland's fault because most of it was before him. But I mean, like, how do you not even find these Brian Russ? Like, they aren't that hard to find. Montreal has a bunch of them. Like Rem Pitlik was on waivers. Like, like you're not telling me that like,
Bergevin,
like,
these guys can be found. Guys.
Yeah,
Bergevin found those guys.
That's the only thing he did well.
Yep.
I mean, if Bergevin was gonna, you know what? Like if any team needed Mark Bergevin as a senior advisor to the general manager, it's Edmonton.
Yeah.
Oh man, they're gonna sign so many third pairing defensemen, which actually is probably better than what they're doing right now because they might not have signed Duncan Keith. So like that might actually be a net positive for them.
Well,
that's
a version of
Calgary traded for Tyler Toffoli, and Calgary didn't need Tyler Toffoli, to be quite honest with you. Edmonton probably did, and Calgary's like, "Yep, that's ours now. We're gonna go take this," and Edmonton's just going, "I can't believe this would happen. Why did no one tell me we could trade for Tyler Toffoli?" And he just stands there.
Right? Another Bergevin move saying, "Oh, there's no centers that get traded." But meanwhile, literally like 15 centers got traded over his tenure. Ryan O'Reilly and all these, I can go down the list. I don't have it in front of me right now, but like that's a whole.
He eventually traded for 2, though. I will give him that.
Absolutely.
Like,
yes, absolutely. But he not while they were number 1 centers though. To be fair, they were prospects at that point. But at the same time though, you look at Edmonton. And Scott mentioned Toffoli. If they trade Dylan Holloway, their 1st and a 5th for Toffoli right now, like they're so much better off than they are right now. Like it's just I don't understand why they're not trying to do things. Like, what are you waiting for? Literally, what are you waiting for? Like, I just don't understand. Are you
another first overall pick?
Are you waiting for McDavid to like ask for a trade so you can get like a Gretzky Hall? Like, is that what you're trying to do? Like, are they trying to make Leon Draisaitl the Messier in 1990? Is that what their goal is? Like, I just don't understand what are you waiting for? I don't understand. Like, I don't say to be an expert necessarily, but I mean, what are you waiting for? It just doesn't make sense. There's no argument you can tell me that makes sense.
No, it doesn't. And like, we compared him to Bergevin, but Ken Holland is way worse than Bergevin. And there's a comment here from Greg Bayer saying, Jesus, you guys always rip on Mark. He was honestly an average GM throughout his tenure. Had good trades and crap picks at the beginning, but decent towards the end. Here's the thing. I mean, not really decent towards the end. I mean, I guess decent picks towards the end, but he kind of did a really bad job in the last year of his tenure. But anyway, the thing about Mark Bergevin is not just that he was a really bad GM, because you're right that he was closer to an average GM, is that Mark Bergevin inherited a core that should have contended for a Stanley Cup, and they never got there because he poorly evaluated them at the very beginning and then couldn't decide on a direction to go with for like 3 or 4 straight years. He was flip-flopping back and forth on what kind of team he wanted them to be. He stuck by a bad coach for too long, and then, he made some good moves the last couple of years, like Suzuki trade, friggin' phenomenal, absolutely massive. The Deneau trade, unbelievable, but it was too late because Price was already in his early 30s. Like, your generational players are too old. Shea Weber, too old. Jeff Petrie, too old. So he waffled for too long when he should have been striking while the iron was hot. And that's a fatal flaw for a general manager. He recognized too late that what he had at the beginning was something special. And maybe if he wasn't a rookie GM, that wouldn't have happened. Maybe he wouldn't make that mistake now. Don't know. But
look,
he made some bad calls.
Like, he made some bad calls. He was also pretty good. Like, he wasn't bad. But I just feel like his you talk about that major flaw. Another major flaw, he didn't understand why this team won games. Like, I just don't feel like he understood what made them successful. Even heading into this offseason, he didn't understand what made them good in the playoffs. And it's not just Carey Price. It's more than that. There were things that were part of that team that made them successful, but he didn't understand why Philip Deneau was so good. He didn't understand what Lars Eller was, right? Like, it's the same problem. We're lucky that Nick Suzuki put up points, because he probably wouldn't understand that either. He didn't insulate himself against Kotkaniemi. He didn't prepare well for that. He didn't manage people very well either. That's another thing. So there's a lot of things, but I will give you this: Mark Bergevin is a much better GM than Ken Holland, because look at Ken Holland.
The bar's
in
low.
his last few years in Detroit. But look at Ken Holland's last few years in Detroit.
Oh,
Like,
disastrous.
god awful.
Like
Like
we complain about
absolutely,
Yoel
like-
Armia. Check out like the
Just
Abdelkader
Abdelkader?
contract. Like
Stephen
what-
Weiss.
Even Darren Helm, who was a legitimately good player, they're like,
Wow.
oh, let's give him like 6 years and $5 million. Like, what are you doing? He's a third liner.
Yeah, it's just Mark Bergevin is a good GM to be perpetually where the Canadiens were, which is
Yes.
bubble playoffs with the chance to impress. And that's, like you said, that's average, right? 15th in the league is average. That's fine. But I just don't think he understood enough about even his own team to take them to that next level. And when he did, it was too late. You know, I don't even know if he understood what Ducharme did when he gave, and again, he was in a no-win situation, right? Like, if he doesn't sign Ducharme to an extension this offseason, we're like, what is he doing? And I just think that he didn't insulate his losses. Like, you can lose Deneau. He wasn't irreplaceable. Hard to replace, yes, not irreplaceable. But then you lose Kotkaniemi or put yourself in a position to lose Kotkaniemi. It's frustrating, because I just feel like those were errors that could have easily been rectified. And you know, like, giving Deneau an extra $500,000 and then not signing Mike Hoffman probably was the right move. You know, giving Kotkaniemi a contract like he's going to sign in Carolina, if you would have given 8 times 5 at the end of the season, he probably would have accepted that, and you'd probably be in a better position than you are right now. And so it's just things like that. Like, I don't blame him necessarily for all the moves he did, but there were clear mistakes, and they just compounded. Like, losing both Deneau and Kotkaniemi, bad.
Yes, very bad.
Like losing Weber. Like, he knew he was losing Weber, and then just signing David Savard, not good. It's just like David Savard would have been a perfect addition if they still had Shea Weber, for example, but not to replace Shea Weber, because they had nothing. Like, John Merrill is doing pretty well in Minnesota, last I checked. Like, I just feel like there's a misunderstanding of what made this team good, and he lost all the parts that made them good. And some through his fault, some not through his fault. Like, you can't blame for Carey Price or even Shea Weber, but there were other ways to get around that.
You can't really blame him for Shea Weber going down, but you can blame him for 100% knowing that was going to happen for several seasons and not making any move to actually improve the team and replace him internally. Like,
right.
Like, really? Like, what if Petrie was gone too right now? Who do they have who can move the puck? I mean, the best puck mover they have might be
Corey
Scooterman.
Schumann.
Yeah. Like, I mean, he's found money for sure. I like him a lot.
A guy who was on AHL contract a year and a half ago, by the way.
Oh my God. It's absolute madness. All right. Before we close things out, we have to talk about Cole Caufield. We haven't even really touched on the fact that he ripped that shot in overtime. Cole Caufield has 4 overtime winners in 54 NHL games played. Like,
cue all the Leafs fans saying, "Oh, he's only a 3-on-3 player."
Yeah, go for it. I mean, didn't he score against the Leafs the other game? But
He did, yes.
Yeah,
yes, he did.
Only a 3-on-3 player, except for the time that he set up Nick Suzuki in overtime
and the playoffs.
Yeah, the playoffs. JT Miller and Alex DeBrincat are the only players in the league who have more overtime goals over the last 2 years than Cole Caufield, and they've played 112 and 110 games. Caufield's at 54. This kid, like, you talk about a clutch gene. As soon as this game is 3-on-3, it's just like, find a spot, Cole. We're gonna find you with the puck. You're gonna rip it home.
That setup from Pitlik was amazing because Hoffman went off the ice and you saw Caufield jump on. You're like, oh shit, he's going to do that thing that he does. And then he didn't just take the wrist shot, though. He loads up a slap shot and just takes Carter Hart's soul with him. It was amazing.
You know who that reminded me of? David Desharnais, of all people. You know when Desharnais did that in a shootout?
The shootout,
yeah. Against the Leafs. It was against the Leafs, too.
That's right.
But I feel like there's like
he's so good.
You should meme Caufield winding up that slop shot with like 2019 draft, on his stick, because it did feel like it was a little bit personal that he wasn't taken and Cam York was taken ahead of him.
Mark Dumont tweeted out the video, by the way, of the Flyers fans reacting to Cam York getting picked over Cole Caufield, and it's every bit as funny as I remember it being. Because they're like, USNDP, yeah.
No, the draft wasn't in Philly, but there was a draft party that was filmed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and they're all watching, and they hear, okay, Flyers select from the U.S. development program. The guy's going, yeah. And they go defense, and you hear a guy in the bar just go, no! It's so good. And I have no word. It's like Caufield continues to just amaze me with how easy he's made it look since St. Louis took over. He looks like a brand new find, like a brand new player. And Jared and I watched his debut in Laval last year, and then in the playoffs and everything like that. He's stupid good when he shoots the puck. I don't know how to put it any better than that. He might be the best pure goal scorer the Canadiens have had in a long time. And with all due respect to Max Pacioretty, when Caufield gets regular line mates and a good coach for his career, he might surpass that once, he gets going here. He's special, and that's the only way I can put it.
And the best thing about Cole Caufield, and I'm not even going to talk about his overtime winner, I'm going to talk about Suzuki's first goal on the power play. The cross-ice pass from Caufield to Suzuki. Once teams start to respect that pass, because he's done it a couple of times already, that's going to open up the shot. And it's similar to Suzuki on the other side, right? Once Suzuki started shooting like crazy, what did teams do? They started backing off, right? And what does he do then? He makes the perfect pass. It's going to be the opposite with Caufield, where what's going to happen is that teams are going to have to defend the pass when he has the puck on the power play. And that's going to open up so many opportunities for him once they have to play the pass on him. And I just think he's not just a shooter. And yes, that's one thing he does really well. It's probably his best skill besides finding space. But I think that what we're seeing and what makes him such a great player and what is going to make him even better is his ability to make plays for others. And that's something that a lot of shooters don't have, but he does. I mentioned smart players. He's smart. He's too smart to fail. And I think that, that's the mindset that's embracing a guy like that is a organization that's going to be very successful. And that's what the Canadiens are doing now. I mean, their coach is pretty much that guy too.
Jared. Love it. That was great.
Cole Caufield can points. That's all I've got to say. That's all I'm adding to the end of this is they're saying from Laura and I's show is Cole Caufield can points. So he's so fucking good at hockey. He's great.
Fun, right? And this is what's so crazy about this season is Caufield is so fun to watch. We saw it last year in the playoffs. We saw it last year at the end of the season, and that fun was just gone for the first half of this season, and it's so good to see it back. I will say one thing that encourages me about Caufield is I know when St. Louis first took over and he was shooting the lights out, it's very easy to be like, oh man, this is how he's going to shoot the rest of his career. And I think he was scoring at one point 30% of his shots. That's not going to continue. However, he's actually shooting a lot more lately. He's getting looks a lot more often. He's going to his shot a lot more often, and not at the detriment of playmaking. He's up to 17 points in 14 games under St. Louis, which is 25th in the NHL over that time. It's pretty good. It's pretty good.
The thing is, if he gets 200 plus shots a year, and he even if he doesn't shoot 30%, he doesn't have to. But if he becomes a volume shooter and is a great shooter, he's shoot him in for 40, right? That's the combination. right? Like, like the whole thing with Gallagher and even Pacioretty to a certain extent is that they were, volume shooters to a certain extent, but also not really great shooters. Like Pacioretty was a great shooter, but not really, he wasn't as high a volume, right? And Gallagher is the opposite. But Cole Caufield,
Pacioretty was pretty high volume as well.
Yeah.
That's true.
That's why he scored like 37 and
that's why he scored
and stuff.
40.
Yeah, or he never
30,
quite hit
exactly.
40. He got 39 one year, but he was like a 300 shot a season guy, which is pretty damn good.
Yeah, exactly. So if Caufield can get like 300 a year, which is not outlandish given the ice time and opportunity he'll get, like that's the recipe for him to be successful. Like you don't have to shoot 20% even to get a lot of goals when you shoot 300 times, right? Like, so yeah, I just think that's, and even when he got sent to Laval, we mentioned earlier, when he got sent to Laval, he didn't look like that player either. Like, I do think that there was a reset that needed to happen. I think that the time in Wisconsin did help him, because remember that first game with Ducharme before he got fired was also his best game of the year, right? It wasn't like St. Louis came in, it was instantly better. He was really good in that first game, that last game under Ducharme as well.
You can see things turning around.
You can see it starting. Yeah, exactly.
But the fact that he immediately scored and then kept scoring after.
Yes, yeah, of course. Not a coincidence. Like, I'm not trying to be a Ducharme apologist here. I'm not.
Oh, I know.
But I do. Yeah, I do think that he definitely had a mindset change. I think that's a part of it, and then obviously the opportunity came with it, and he ran with it because he's a good player, and that's what good players do, right? Like that's just a recipe. You put good players in good situations, you're going to get good results. And I mean, that's pretty much what the Canadiens are doing under Martin St. Louis. It's not that it sounds so simple, which is why it's so frustrating that it took them, 50 games to get there, or whatever it was, 40 something games.
Yeah, it's fun. Like that's the biggest takeaway from what's going on right now. It's fun.
Yeah.
Everybody's looking forward to the future.
Man.
All right,
before we
close out the show, we promised at the beginning that we would talk about Austin Matthews pooping his diaper and probably getting suspended at possibly the worst time for the Maple Leafs because their goaltenders can't stop anything. And I love when Steve Dangle is posting like the screenshots of every goal lately, and Mrazek is never touching blue paint. Like, there have been some rough goaltending situations here, but even Caden Primo this year, I feel like, was not out of the blue paint on every goal.
Peter Mrazek has made Samuel Montembeault look like prime Carey Price this season, and that's saying a lot because Samuel Montembeault has like an .897 save percentage, and he looks light years better than the current Leafs goaltending situation. With little to do, no respect to Peter Mrazek, like, dude, what the hell are you doing? I looked up and I saw Matthews scored. I'm like, okay, Toronto's going to take over this game. And then, nope, what are you doing? I get it. TJ Brody deflected one in your net. Cool. Ben Sherratt does that 6 times a week in Montreal. They're fine. You get used to it. But the third goal he let in, and then the fourth one where he knocked his own net off and they counted it. It's bad. And then Matthews lost his temper, admittedly. He gets roughed up out there the same way McDavid when he elbowed Kotkaniemi in the face last year in that game. He just got sick and tired of it. The difference is you cross-checked a dude in the neck in front of the entire national audience in a fit of rage. Then you got laid out by Dylan Cousins, and Michael Bunting came to your defense, and he got folded like a lawn chair, and it's just all around embarrassing. Like, there's being a sore loser, and then there's whatever the hell happened in that game. Like, I'm going to be shocked if they suspend him because it's the NHL and the Department of Player Safety is a joke, but it's not a good look for a team that is struggling this much. Teams know that the mental fragility is there, and you're going to get under their skin now. You don't think Brendan Gallagher is going to park himself 3 inches from Peter Mrazek's face for every single game they play for the rest of the year? It's going to be a nightmare for him until they figure it out.
They need to acquire a big hulking defenseman like Ben Sherratt for a first-round pick and Matthew Nyes.
At Kyle Dubas, stop. Acquire Ben Sherratt for a first. Stop. Topi Niemela would be nice too. Stop. Thanks, Kent.
But I'm getting the McDavid vibes from Matthews, right? And Scott mentioned it. Like, I just feel like that is when, like, they're a good team. but they have a fatal flaw and can't seem to correct it. And look, Jack Campbell was not the reason they lost to Montreal at all. You can argue he outplayed Carey Price, except for Game 6 overtime. But at the same time, they got no production from their top players, and that's on them. And I think that's where things need to go. And it's just, I don't know. We talked about Marc Bergevin not knowing how to get the Canadiens to the next level. I don't know whether Kyle Dubas and Sheldon Keefe know how to get more out of this Leafs team. And I think that, yes, the goaltending is part of it, and you can't coach goaltending. But at a certain point, man, Jake Allen would get a first-round pick right now between Edmonton or Toronto. If he was healthy, he'd be traded to either Edmonton or Toronto for a really good amount, and you can make an argument they should do it. He's the perfect situation for both those teams right now.
Yeah, 100%. He's cheap. He's shown that he can play in the playoffs before. I will say, I'm less skeptical of Kyle Dubas than some others are, just because I look at his work in this offseason, and as much criticism as he faced for running it back, bringing in Kasha and Bunting were absolute home runs. Nick Ritchie didn't work out, but he was able to trade Ritchie while addressing a need on defense and not keeping any salary. So pretty whirlwind of great moves for Kyle Dubas. But I do see the fact that they keep doubling down on defense is a bit problematic, because it hasn't been defense that's killed them in the last couple of playoffs. Going back to the Bruins series, sure. But against the Blue Jackets and the Canadiens, it's that their offense died, right? It was Jason Spezza and Willie Nylander carrying the bag, and that was it. Because Deneau was in Matthews' face the entire series, and Mitch Marner completely wilted. Will he do that this year? I don't know. I think that he's been pretty good this year, but who knows what's going on in their heads. But we don't need to talk about the Leafs anymore. They get enough airtime. Will somebody please talk about the Toronto Maple Leafs?
How do the Toronto Maple Leafs affect the Toronto Maple Leafs on Game Over Montreal?
Seriously. All right, I'm gonna wrap it up because I gotta get to bed. And thanks you guys for both for joining me. Before I close out the show, first Jared, then Scott. Tell everybody where they can find your stuff.
At Jared Book on Twitter, Habs Eyes on the Prize, every day. That's where we have our stuff. That's the key. And working hard and covering hockey.
You can find me at Scott Matla on Twitter. Please don't yell at me about the gifts. It's what's happening in the game, for the love of God. I'm also at Habs Eyes on the Prize, where I do not work nearly as hard as Jared or Justin. And then Locked On Canadiens at LO_Canadiens with my fantastic co-host Laura Saba. We do a show every single day on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.
All right. Thanks everyone for tuning into the show. Really appreciate it. We'll be back at it on Tuesday. Excited to chat with you all then. And obviously, check out the SDPN app. Check out the SDPN shop. Buy some Game Over merchandise, because it helps support the show. Tell all your friends about the show, especially Canadiens fans. Tell them to tune in live or watch on YouTube or listen on Spotify or whatever. Rate the show, like the YouTube video, subscribe to the channel, all that